in the name of the one and only. We are starting today's lecture, and I think the title was The I Without the I. I wanted to make a disclaimer, and the disclaimer is that everyone here is so generous with their wonderful comments and compliments, which I appreciate. But there's one compliment that I think we can do without, and that compliment is that sometimes you consider me or refer to me as alim. I'm nowhere near a alim. Alim is a man or a woman of knowledge. I have a few certificates from a few institutions, and I don't think that's enough. I think if we have to define a person in terms of an approach to understanding, there are people of knowledge. They have the skills, they have the training, they have the methodology, they have the philosophy. They are in a different class. Which of course I'm not. What I maybe, and again this is a maybe with a triple underline, I'm a person of ideas, a person of thinking. I'm an observer. I look at things and analyze through my observation. So sometimes I find wonderful ideas through my observation, through my own analysis. And sometimes I say things that after a few days I start laughing at myself. And those will be the times that you have already called me man of knowledge. I think if we use the Farsi word, there's a difference between, I think, danishmand and andishmand. I'm not a danishmand. Andishmand in the sense that I think about things. And, like it goes in 15 different ways. And that trademark of trying to confuse everyone is because the idea is still churning and stirring me, and it's in the raw. It's in the formative stage. So in that sense, it has not, in some cases, it has not congealed, it has not held itself. So in a way, my thinking and your thinking, your questions, your responses, they blend together, and we get somewhere. So that's the disclaimer. We talk about the I, that's the second I, the capital pronoun for first person singular, very, very singular. And that one has to do with our approach towards understanding things. We often, when it comes to matters of religion, philosophy, faith, mystical thought, irfan, tasawwuf, all of that, often means we direct our questions towards the ultimate goal, which is God. Is there God? How do you prove God? Everything is focused on God. Not too many people ask the question which is more critical, and that is, don't ask about whether there is God or not. Ask about whether there is you or not, because you're the other side. You're the telescope in which you're looking for God at the other end. But is your eye equipped to do that? So, Khudashinasi, plenty. Everyone is talking about. Khudshinasi, nobody's talking about. At least from the angle that I want to approach it today. In my analytical approach, I sometimes think too microcosmically. I look at very, very small things. And at one level you might think why are we interested in the letter Qaf, for example? So I will talk the whole hour about the letter Qaf and its significance, or the letter Ha. And today we are talking about the letter Ain. And if you look at the chart, again, I wish it were in color, you would have seen that the key words here all contain the letter Ain in it. And I personally think that when you look at the Arabic language, perhaps, I don't know how, I can't explain it, and I can't understand it. It's because when people make language, they don't sit behind a desk and say, okay, let's make a word like this with these letters and we call it that. It doesn't happen that way. Language has its natural flow. It has its spontaneity. Language is not made by designers who say, okay, we are going to compose this particular word and make it out of these and these letters. But somehow it happens that it is like that. So, we have the Arabic word tab'is, and right in the middle of that word is ayn, tab'is. And from it we get three other words, and this of course is in respect to our understanding of the self. So the first ayn is atifa, the second one is aq, the third one is ta'assub. Again, each one has the same letters. In the understanding of ourselves, the mistake we often make is that we reduce our humanity to one or another dimension. Since the age of enlightenment, for example, people are saying that anything that is worth considering, it has to be scientific. And scientific means it has to be related to our rational side, to our power of the reason, to the act. And if things are not convincing on the basis of rationalism and reason, then it's not valid at all. You go to any college, any university, any institution of learning in the West, the minute you say the smallest thing that doesn't come from the mind, it comes from the heart, for example, they will dismiss it. This is not scholarship. There's no objectivity. You're appealing to someone's emotion. You're expressing your own feelings. You're talking about your own intuition. That is not scientific. So science is reduced only to the power of reason, which is aqlaniyat, and this has become popular since the age of enlightenment, and in my humble opinion, that is the big mistake. It's a mistake because before the age of enlightenment, everything was atifa and qalb and belief. The age of the Christian theocracy in Europe. The problem with the Western civilization is that it does not have the ability to balance several things at the same time. So throughout its history, it has been either the matter of heart ruling over the matter of the mind, or the matter of mind ruling over the matter of heart, never together. And this starts from the age of the Greek civilization, the mythos and the logos and the eros fighting with one another, down to the era of the Christian theocracy, where if it was a matter of revelation, it was okay. If it was a matter of reason, it was not accepted. That's why Copernicus and Galileo's faced the fate that they had, we know about. Now, by contrast, non-Western civilization, or at least in respect to Islam, they had the ability to have both, except that in the past 1 or 2 centuries, we have also become Westerners in this respect, that our educational system, whether we study in the West or we study back in our countries, in the Muslim countries, it is still a Western education. It's still that either or, not both and. So, as we can look at this chart then, there is room for both and analysis. That is, Atifa and Aql and Ta'assub could all work together. And I'm not saying there are only these three. I'm only analyzing these three. I think we humans are way too complex for being reduced to one or the other. If you can follow this cursor we have here, the Atifa will be the emotional side of us. It is the part that's in our heart. It's the intuition. It's the inner feelings. The Aql is believed to be concentrated in the brain. So brain is the physical instrument or organ in our body where the activity of our reasoning is detected. The neuron endings and all the other scientific jargon that we don't need to discuss. And then Ta'assub comes from the Asab part. So everything doesn't necessarily happen in the brain. Things do happen in, we have doctors here. For instance, the knee-jerk reaction when they test your reflexes. In most of those cases, at least to the extent that I understand, which is very little, that the decision is made right there by that part of the body instantly in the reflexes. So probably the brain would not even register it. Now, do we consider that as a separate entity or not? That's one thing. But in respect to us understanding ourselves, we would look at it this way. The Atifa is the positive energy, the energy of the emotion and feelings. The Ta'assub is the negative. There is a little negative hiding here. But the Aql could be both positive and negative. So Atifa, since it comes from the heart, and the heart is where the blood flows, I chose the color red for that. And so you can get mixtures here, like in a salad bowl, depending on which vegetables you want to put together. So if your emotion side works all by itself, and then it gets, which is positive, and then you get some positive energy from the Aql part of it, from the reason, from your rational side. When these two come together, okay. So the green arrow from here, the red arrow from here, that creates awareness, agahi. If the energy from your heart, from Atifa, comes here, and instead of the reason, the Asab part of it comes to it, the two of them will create narcissism, which is misspelled here. We need one more S. Or khudshifdagi, or anoniyat, maniyat. We have all kinds of words for it. So what narcissism is that you take your emotions, but you apply it to what? To your asab. Asab, in Arabic, it's referred to more like the blood that runs through you, or your genetic code. So when a person is called muta'assib, is the person who likes things that are related to him or her, generally through the bloodline. So if you like your own family better than everyone else, of course, if you like yourself better, your family better, your tribe, your nation, anything that has you in it, if you like that better than others and you feel you have strong feelings for it, then you're operating at the level of asabiyya, which in English we call prejudice, from the Latin, that is prejudged. And the way we judge it, that anything that is ours is better than anything that's somebody else's. So if you get that combination from the Atifa, your emotions, mixed with the Asab, then you'll get narcissism. However, if you get part of the apple, the reasoning power in green, and if that's mixed with your asab, you get uqday haqarat, or the complex, inferiority complex generally. And the reason for that is that your asab tells you you're the best, better than anyone else. Then reason jumps in and says, oh really? Let me check. When the reason goes after the reality check and you don't measure up, and you feel like you're not even, you're not above anyone, you're not even equal to anyone, in fact you might be even below, and so you feel inferior, and then that creates the complex. So this happens all at the level here on the right, the pendar. That's how you think. Nobody else is involved, only you. How you see yourself individually. You create your own perception. And so underneath I wrote Dar in Zawa. So it's your perception by yourself. At this level, you're not interacting with other people in this regard. And that creates the zihniyat, which is the perception. So you have an image of yourself. We all have one. And our image is made of these, at least these three elements, at least in respect to our discussion. How much of you are in the heart, how much of you are in the mind, and how much of you are in your nervous system. That creates your personality based on what we could call I don't know if I should call it disorder, but a perception. So we all either feel good about ourselves or bad. Now, then we see this black line here. This black line separates two things. One, pendar, which is perception, which then turns to bawar, which is belief. And the way it turns into belief is when other people come and they validate your belief, your perceptions. They agree with you or they disagree with you when you interact with others. So in that respect, then, the agahi is an awareness within the self. When we share it with the community, it becomes ma'rifat. Now you're in gnosis. The khodshiftagi or narcissism, you might feel about it that way yourself, but when you share it with others and many other people in your group, in your tribe, in your nation, in your linguistic or ethnic group feel the same, then you got egotism there. And the complex here, when it gets in a group, how do they say that? When you have pain and you're in group, it listens. The community, I think there's an Arabic saying, the community listens your pain and increases your joy. So sometimes you're very happy by yourself, and since there's nobody, you're not screaming or shouting or jumping up and down. But only after you're with like-minded people, then you all start jumping and clapping, and the clapping, applause is a sign of that. It's a collective registration of joy, happiness, and approval. Now, the same thing could happen with the pain here. So, remember, complex at the individual level is the pain. But once you start working with the group, they start supporting you. And so, with this collective support, all of a sudden now you don't feel bad. Now you feel good. You felt individually you felt inferior, but collectively you feel superior. And that's where it leads to a cult or to fascism. Fascism is nothing but considering yourself superior to other, of course, in a group context. Nationalism is a form of fascism. Supranationalism definitely is. And so there are all these isms, which is a collective response. Now, what happened here was that we took that image, that perception, that image of the self you had within your perception. Only you knew who you were. Now you join the group, all of a sudden you have a different image. It is either strengthened or weakened, reinforced, or validated. And it's at that level where it can become very dangerous, very, very negative, or it could become very, very positive. And what is happening in the world today, it is that combination, that fascism here, and in some countries it's the fascism that gets mixed with egotism, depending on what kind of energy, negative energy, the leaders produce in the people. And in the context of these two ideas alone, all the examples we can see in the world today are exactly that. The Hindus in India feel more superior because now it wasn't Narendra Modi alone. It is the Janata Party who are saying, like, India for the Hindus, get rid of the Muslims, force them to either convert or be disenfranchised, take special status away from Kashmir. All of these are collective actions that feeds on that collective identity of a superiority of one group over another, for whatever reason. In that case, it happens to be religion. You go north of the Himalaya mountains in China, the same thing is happening. Now, because to the Chinese, religion is not important, they are using the race card. So Han Chinese are brought in from the eastern seaboard, who used to be less than 6% of the population in eastern Turkestan. Now they're more than 40%. Not just the numbers, but they have the best lands, the best factories, the best, they have everything. And people of eastern Turkestan, the Uyghurs, have become, they are in the process of becoming not only a minority in numbers, but a minority in race. And if you look through all the terrible reports that are coming from that, this indoctrination through the camps is just to tell them, forget about religion, about your faith, about your ethnicity, about your language. You're Chinese. You didn't know it. So here we go. What the Turks did to the Kurds almost 100 years ago. The same story. Now, then we could go to Israel, and the same thing, the superiority of the chosen, and the people were not chosen to be superior racially, rather they were chosen because they were tasked with the propagation of a monotheistic belief system to the world community. They were tasked, they were not chosen. I think the word might be misunderstood because it's often construed racially. And you could go to, almost any, look at the United States. We began the Muslim ban, that was our first action. So now it somehow has become fashionable around the world for people to discriminate openly against Muslims because they're their favorite minority of the 21st century, as Jews were their favorite minority in the 20th century, between World War I and II. So those would be operating at that level here, that the complex becomes a cult, and we had them in the cult form like the skinheads, the white supremacists. Those were cults, or the Irgun in Israel. Those were cults, okay? BJP was a cult in Gujarat. But now those cults are in charge of the whole state. They are not cults anymore, they are fascists now. That will be the difference, that a cult operates within a smaller group. And so that's where all the negative was. Now on the positive side, there is marifat or gnosis. Gnosis would be an idea where you had a perception from Atifa at the Agahi level. Then when it came to the group thinking, when the belief was formed, then you found your place in the totality of existence. Whether you believed in a particular religion is secondary, but to know your place within the cosmic reality, that's much more important. And that's why people who are operating at the level of gnosis, they could be Muslim Sufis, they could be Zen Buddhists, they could be Kabbalist Jews, they could be spiritualist Christians. They speak the same language and they get along with each other perfectly. There's no fighting and killing and converting each other there. And that's because they have reached it from the level of qalb, gone through an awareness, and are expressing it at the group level. And so we see, like, at least in the United States, many times you go to these Sufi groups, you have a presumption that they're all Muslim. They are not. But they all act like. I have a friend who has a Muslim name in Arabic, who has a Hindu name, and who has an English name.
MashaAllah.
All three. And he has a beautiful website, Facebook, that he posts things on it like 2-3 times a day. He's a wonderful man. I'm sure you know, with these interfaith gatherings, I'm sure you've seen him. And now, this is how that energy that goes through us individually or collectively, how we experience that energy. However, the end result is, from Marifa you get love, Ishq. Ishq comes from the heart, and it expresses itself back as the closest feeling to the heart. From Khudshiftagi comes kufr, and kufr would be denial. It's the denial of the truth. And the denial could go different ways. You either deny the truth of, let's say, the truth of God, and you become kafir. And sometimes you're in the denial of the self. And so it could go fall on either side of the equation. And from fascism comes nothing but hatred. So between love and hatred is the denial. And fascism has to feed on hatred because they cannot operate unless there is an enemy towards which they can direct their hatred. You cannot hate and not have an object of hate. There has to be someone to be hated. And you can justify it different ways. You know, find a group, blame something on them, historically, present, past, future. You know, economically, it always happens like that. Unemployment goes up, it's the fault of the Mexicans, right? And the economy is not working, it's the fault of the Jews. You know, the foreign trade doesn't work, it's the fault of the Muslims. Or right now, for a time we targeted the Muslims ideologically, we targeted the Chinese economically, and we target, you know, just find someone, target them for something, and it works. And people easily want to, what we generally call an externalization. Instead of looking within yourself, instead of looking realistically at what the problem is, you externalize it, you otherize it, you make it bigana. And that way, you don't have to change anything. You feel good about it because, you know, it wasn't your fault. And blame, it's an escape from responsibility. That's what it is. And you cannot blame someone unless there is something wrong with them, and that will be the nafrat part of it. So, now, if we leave the geometry up there, we can come a little bit to the equation of mathematics down here at the bottom. So, aql plus atifa equals to agahi, dar nihayat ishq. So that's love plus emotions. It leads to awareness that becomes love. And atifa, and then the ta'asub. Oops, here we go with ta'assub, and that becomes anoniyat, and that is dar nihayat kufr, which is the emotion that works with your the way you detected your nervous system. It becomes the narcissistic tendencies in which eventually you're denying something. And then the last one was the act with the ta'assub that creates uqda, that is the power of reason with your nervous system that results in a complex that creates eventually hatred. Now, which one do we choose from these? Do we have a choice, or are we pre-programmed to be one or the other? What combination do you want? Remember the analogy of the salad bowl. Some of you may like more tomatoes, others may like more onions, and so on. When you make a choice, I have written here the word choice at the bottom. No, the cursor right here. What is that word? What is ikhtiyar? You have read all the philosophical arguments. I agree with all of you. Now, I'm looking at it again, remember my microcosmic perceptions. In the Christian belief system, in Judeo-Christian belief system, humans are born with the original sin. We did something wrong from the beginning. There was something wrong with us. And because of that, we have a tendency to do things wrong. In other words, there is a Satan within us by nature. It's in our DNA. The imprint is there. So we are programmed by design to do wrong. Now, the Jews would do, what do we call Jews in Arabic?
Yahud.
And there's another word? Jahud. And the Jahud comes from? From Jahad. Jahad is struggle. You struggle with yourself to make yourself better. Yahud comes from Hidayat, that they are guided. So you might be guided, but you have to do your own best to make yourself better. And so that is the Jewish line of thinking. The Christian line of thinking is a little bit different. Yes, you had the original sin, but then someone came and sacrificed, died for you, so that you would be forgiven. And so your salvation is only through Jesus. And therefore, responsibility is not individual, but with a group, and the whole group, anyone who is a Christian, believes in Jesus, they will go to heaven. Now, the Islamic perception is that, number one, if there was, now that's a big if there was ever an original sin, that sin was committed by Iblis. Adam had nothing to do with sin. So the Iblis disobeyed God, and so if there was an original sin, it was over there. Once it came to the human level, there is no original sin. And for that reason, oftentimes when we talk about, in a cross-cultural way, we translate words from one language to another, but we do not translate them from one culture to another. And that's where most of the misunderstandings occur. Let's take the word that the Christians would use often, the word innocent. What is innocent in Farsi and Arabic? Masum. Masum is begunah. Now, are children masum? Absolutely not. Because they don't even have the capacity. Look at it that way. Grown-ups could commit sin. They could make mistake. They could speed in traffic like I did yesterday. Okay, so the grown-ups, the word innocent or guilty or sinful is relevant. It's applicable. But to call a child innocent, which we do, right? To call the child innocent is because then we have assumed that a child is capable of committing sin, whereas we don't. Even in Islamic jurisprudence, the bulugh is the element there that at a certain level, like in Japanese kindergartens and Japanese schools, in the first few years of their schooling, there is no test. Nobody fails. And in the world's best educational system in Finland, the same thing. That should have been the Islamic way. We should have understood that masumiyat, or innocence, does not apply to children. But we have brought it in. So, and in many ways, a Christian thought, a Judeo-Christian thought has crept very slowly into the Islamic culture, and we operate it as though it is our thing. Why I chose the word ikhtiyar? I'm thinking that, yes, we do have choice. For those of you who remember one of my previous lectures on an archetypal Adam with no Eve, I explained there how the third Adam was created. There were several Adams, not one. And the third Adam is the Adam who attains the right to self-determine, the freedom of choice. It was this third Adam that chose whether or not to partake of the tree, pomegranate tree. That's a whole other story. In the Garden of Eden, which was a wonderful thing. They did not commit a sin. They attained choice. How could they have choice if they didn't do what they wanted to? If they only did what God wanted them, they would have been robots. And human beings are above the robots. Who are the robots?
Conscious.
Exactly. So then we would have been like angels, but maqami adami bolataras, maqami farishtas. So human level is above the angels because they have ikhtiyar. Now, if you look at those words I have over here, the letters, I believe that choice is not that you're choosing between good and bad. That in our Quranic, Islamic DNA, the goodness is the preferred. That yes, you choose, but you're programmed to choose good instead of bad. The opposite of the Judeo-Christian belief. Ikhtiyar. What are the letters? Aleph, Khe, Te, Ya, Aleph, Re. So that is ikhtiyar. Now, you split the words top and bottom. At the top you get Khe, Ya, Re, which is what? Khair. So khair, khubi, choosing good. The word good is part of that word itself, in the structure of the word. So you're not just choosing, but your DNA is programmed to choose good, which puts it at the exact opposite of the Judeo-Christian belief. But if you do, let me use a Farsi word, a mushigofi, okay, split the words, the letters, and a lot of time there is an encoded message in there that tells you how things ought to be, or what meanings, what values were inserted, included. And that's why when I said in the beginning that it seems like there were some people sitting together and they were designing the words, how to form them, what sounds to bring, and what meaning to encode in it. It seems like that, but that cannot be substantiated logically. So, what was this whole talk about? That was the I. The I without the I, the last I, the pronoun. The I which we always capitalize. We capitalize that I, and there's one other word we capitalize. Any word that refers to? God, exactly. So where have we put ourselves? Right next to God. So that's how much we are in the self. Now, if we move from this eye to the other eye, the EYE, that is to get out of the self. That all these things are this side of the, remember we talked about the telescope in search for God? Here you realize who you are. After you have understood yourself, then you may bother looking for what you're looking. Now you have adjusted your instrument. You have found the range of it. You know how to operate it. You know how to focus it. You know how much light it needs. After you have gone through all of that this side of the telescope is already ready to be, quote-unquote, operationalized, then you turn the telescope out there to see what you're going to find. And that will be the eye. Talking about the disclaimer, what were the two words I used? One was Danish. The other one was? Andesha. And the word that rhymes with Danish is? Binesh. Okay, Danish is based on ilm. Binesh is based on? Basirat, didan.
Perception.
No, you have to have the eye beyond the perception. So Basirat is, in many spiritual traditions, it is the eye in the head, the eye in the heart. It is not these physical eyes. It is another eye, and we usually use it as singular. Chishmedel.
Insight, visual,
Insight, not insight, but insight. That accent makes a whole lot of difference. Yeah.
Oh, insight.
Insight, yeah. But don't incite anyone with it. So, now, if we have that eye, after we have worked on this other eye that is here, then we can see different. So an Arab would say, if they would ask you, do you speak Arabic, the Arabic language, they would say, تكلم باللغة, باللغة العربي, right? So they use the word لغة. لغة means the language, that would be the word. Kalam is not the word. It is the vessel that contains a meaning. Okay? So, how it came to the Prophet, it's not that God or Jibril talked. The lugha was not relevant here. Lughat matrah nabud, zaban insan matrah nabud. Only after the Prophet is telling everyone else, there, if we emphasize on the language, we say, yeah, Quran was revealed in the Arabic language, but we never refer to it as lugha because the language was not important. It was the message contained in those words that mattered. And that's why we would have to call it kalam. And kalam is the totality of the meaning that was conveyed. So, did we get to the second eye, or rather the first one, depending on the order? For that eye, you would have to get out of yourself. You have to turn this thing off here. When people who do meditation, okay, regardless of what tradition, it doesn't matter. In meditation, the idea is you have to turn the worldly senses off. Why? Because that's exactly the situation where the Quran was revealed. Where was it revealed? In the dark cave in isolation. Did the Prophet need his eyes? No. His ears? No, he didn't need to have any of that. He had to have been operating at the level of Basirat. And that Basirat contains all the other senses. That connects at a higher level, not at this level. And so, therefore, in order for you to understand, if you want to understand the worldly matters, yeah, no problem. Use all your five senses. They're rational, reasonable, all of them. They would work for you. They were meant to be. But don't use a telescope in place of a microscope, for example. they're designed, one is designed to make the smaller entity bigger, the other one is to make the farther closer. At one level they may appear the same. So the idea here for us is also, in order for Basirat, you have to get through your inner senses, not the outer ones. The outer ones are fine where they are, what they do, whatever their function is. But it's the inner senses where you have an eye. And through that eye, you can reach to the farthest corner of any universe you understand. You understand that universes are plural. So there is no singularity there, unless you're talking about the singularity, which is a whole other discussion. Yes, yes.
Thank you very much. As beautiful as ever. So charming dissertation, very well expressed.
With your beautiful perceptions, it's now even more beautiful.
I'm just seeking a clarification. You discussed the thesis of original sin that the Bible talks about.
Mm-hmm.
And then you presented the thesis of FDR.
Yeah.
That means we seek the goodness. We are beholden to seek to be good and to seek goodness. But then we have the Quranic thesis also that says, وَالْعَاسْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. In other words, the thesis says that we human beings will make mistakes, will sin. Now, how do you reconcile what the Bible says, the Quran says, and with your thesis here?
When we say إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ, it means we are at loss. That is, we do not measure up when it comes to the greater reality, the cosmic reality. I mean, if you're in your own living room, you're everything, right? And as soon as you step out and you see the greater the world you realize, the smaller you become. So with a greater awareness, that is the loss. Now, we are also created through God's first emanation. And the first emanation was through the aql part. And God being the aql kull, we are the aql juz'i. So if we're juz is at a loss. That's the khusran. And so therefore, that's another way to look at it. And then we could still argue in terms of, in order to accept God's perfection, nothing else can be perfect. So everything else is imperfect. And so in that imperfection, that's another of our laws. So, which is what we refer to kharabat in tasawwuf. Kharabat comes from the word kharab, and kharab is generally understood by the common people on the street. That, oh, you get drunk and you're kharab and you lose your senses. That's not the point. Kharab is it's that level of that martaba, that state where you destroy, you ruin your egotistic tendencies. Kharabi wa nabudi adat nafsani. When you destroy them, you kharab them, right? Then you are left with what? Okay, so you destroy your animalistic instinct, huy haywani. That is the true kharabat. And then you connect with what we call akhlaq malakuti. You operate at that higher level. And so when you operate at that level, you have to destroy this level. And in this destruction is, again, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. You are in this one. You are meant to be destroying. And I know you're sensitive to the word of killing the self, but that killing or destroying of the self is part of that. So yeah, we are meant to destroy this. That's the only way we can become one with the divine.
We will have to make mistakes. We will have to sin.
That's more application of a Christian concept to the human. And the thing is that no, we don't have to make mistake. We have to be good because in ikhtiyar, the inherent composition of the word implied that in a choice, it is implied that you will choose good. Khair is in ikhtiyar. So it's not that. But I think the two questions of the khusr and the sin is different. In sin, sin is action-centered. You have done something. Khusr is a reference to a reality. Like if someone tells me, like, I will never have as much money as Bill Gates, for example, that's a reality. It's a recognition of that reality. Did I do anything wrong? No, I didn't. But is that the reality? Yes, that is the reality. Now, we will leave Bill Gates at this gate, we go above the other gate to the divine power. And so God is the totality. God is perfect. God is the complete. God has everything. Compared to God, we will never be as complete, as perfect, as absolute. We will be relative. That's our relativity. Einstein discovered one of them, and I'm sharing the other one.
در مورد خرابات حالا شعر حافظ make sense میکنه اینجا. در خرابات مغان نور خدا میبینم.
Yes.
این عجب این که
we are running out of time now, but next time we can talk about kharabat next time. That will be our next topic. We can go through poetry and analyze it and see how really kharab we are. Yeah. Thank you so much.
There's a theory that Dr. Surush has. I don't know if you're familiar with his theory. That, for one thing, that Prophet always received the revelation when he was not himself. He would go, was not in this world when he was getting revelation. People around him would know that the revelation is coming because he would basically become some,
He would be in another world.
He would be in another world. He would sweat, and he was kind of in a half sleepy, napping mode or something like that.
I agree with him on the way I explain it is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
I'm reaching it from a different angle, and the point is that it's difficult for us to conceive of a situation where a communication takes place, but it's not between two entities with a personality. And that's why we give them personality. That's why we give God personality, we give Jibril personality, we give Iblis personality. We make, this personhood business is our problem. And I'm not speaking for Dr. Soros, I'm not qualified, but I think we are approaching the issue in the same way, is that the main problem that it's not just for the believing Muslims, it's for the disbelieving Muslims who are polite enough but are not convinced. And our problem is that we dismiss them. We put them down, we degrade them, we think they did something terrible. In reality, they didn't, at least not in my perception. I think the atheists are some of the best believers because they question. And so when you question, you may reach a different conclusion, and that's fine. That's why we have ikhtiyar. So I would understand the Wahyani aspect of the Prophet's life to be that, is that it had to have occurred at the level of basirat. The sama wal basara would have been at a different level. It had to be understood through the inner senses. The message that is understood through the outer senses for the inner world.